This is Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium.
Today's guest is Mark Sunshine. Mark is currently a vocalist for Unida, Patriarchs in Black, and The Lost Beacon. Mark also sang for Riotgod, plus more than a few other bands since starting his musical career. He has toured and performed nationally, internationally, experiencing small club environments and larger festivals such as Wacken and Desertfest, as well as others. For nearly 40 years, Mark has been refining a vocal style one can describe as perfect for hard rock or proto metal. Influenced by a wide range of styles and techniques, at 19, Mark made a choice and gravitated towards singing after briefly exploring drumming. Self-taught, it's been a lifetime of daily learning and vocalizing, all while keeping his passion for visual arts alive. It's a pleasure to have you on, Mark.
Well, thank you.
It's very, very cool for me because I met you through Patriarchs in Black. And I know Dan and I know Johnny Kelly. And we were talking because I'm like a big fan of all of their music. Mm-hmm. And I was going through a lot of how they were releasing, on social media. And I was like, wow, what is this? I was like, oh my God, I saw this guy, Mark Sunshine. And I was like, this is really great. And I was like listening because you had done a cover. So I want to start out talking about the cover because, first of all, it's one of my favorite songs. And second of all, your voice is amazing. So I'm a number one fan of yours. So first of all, how did you meet the guys in Patriot in Black?
To me, it's always about that first kind of initial exposure. A band I was in, we opened up on a bill at a club called Studio One, which is no longer there in Newark. It was a big club back in the late 80s, 90s. And we opened up for a larger bill that was headlined by Hades. That was Dan's band. That band that I was in, I moved on to a different band called System Addict with Ed Furman and Damon Trotta, and I was in their band for a few years. And just peripherally, we opened for Dan's newer band called Nonfiction. In fact, I still have video. I still have video of one particular show that we played down in Asbury Park. I'm editing that, but it's got some classic footage of Asbury Park. It's still got the palace was still erect. It was still there. But I never really socialized with them or hung or did anything like that. It was just you would see people when you would, by chance, But I haven't stopped singing. I've had my ups and downs, fertile and fallow periods, but the drummer, Mike, he's kept abreast of what I've been doing generally, and he's in communication with Dan more frequently than I was. And he said, hey, you should check out what Sunshine's doing, if you're looking for someone, a different vocalist to do, because that's their thing. For people that don't know out there, the Patriarchs in Black's ethos is that Johnny Kelly and Dan Lorenzo are the core of the this kind of, I guess you could call it almost a collective. And then different bassists and vocalists participate depending on how Dan decides to distribute the songs to each and every. So they got in touch with me, and the first thing I did for them was the Immigrant song, and they hadn't found anyone that was doing it to their liking, I guess. But anyway, so I did the Immigrant song for them, and then that started our association.
Well, that's a great choice for your voice. So can you go over the other songs that you've done with them?
It's been interesting because to every one of the songs, like, for example, it's a very subtle choice. I usually have to add a layer to it to make it mine. In the Immigrant song, I did just arrangement, where I added a different vocal. I did like a call and response vocal, and I wanted my interpretation of it to really kind of allude to what it's all about, which was reaving and the whole Viking violent situation, but you hear the tune now as it's so comfortably nestled in nostalgia and familiarity that you really sometimes, not that everything has to be so exact, but for me, it's always good when you're trying to lend, you're doing a cover song that's very, very well worn, very, very well done. and by many, many people over time. I think even, the girls from Heart, they did an immigrant song. It's been played with. And so the best thing that you could do outside of technique and approach to, of course, always keeping true to the standard, but the best thing that you could do is maybe try to give it a different vivacious treatment by considering what the song's actually about. And then the way I looked at it was to try and emote that in the singing. And so I did that. I've done 2 other covers with them. One was a request by Johnny Kelly to do Games Without Frontiers, which I always loved. And, as much of a fan of the song as I am, and as much a fan of both of the respective artists who are involved in it, such as Kate Bush and Peter Gabriel, I'm a huge Kate Bush fan, but for the life of me, I never knew that she did the initial vocals, the frontier, the whole French thing at the beginning. And so I had to sing both those parts. And that was a challenge because, she's got this smooth feel to her voice. So you have to, and I think back to that scene with, what's his name? When they did the Ray Charles movie, and they showed how Ray Charles did his own backup harmonies. Sometimes if the Rayettes or whatever they were called were not available, he would do them.
Yes.
So that's the spirit that you have to channel. You have to say it's not a worry that it's a female voice. Just it's kind of like a form of sincere mimicry, and that's fun to do. And the other one was an interesting thing because I'm a big Queen fan, but I don't know all of their material. But they wanted me to do Dragon Attack. And I was just like, I listened to it. I was like, oh my. I took a look at the album cover, and it looks like Freddie went to a leather warehouse and got everyone a costume. He's like, all right, boys, let's do it. Here, you wear this. Roger, you wear this. Here you go. That's good. That's what. And I was like, holy smokes. So I listened to the tune. It didn't come to me immediately. I didn't vibe with it because it had a weird vibe to it. The original, it was very thin to me, and then of course it's got that solid bass line that goes through the whole thing, but at first I did a vocal pass and it wasn't successful. And then I just kind of said, oh, the hell with it. Just go for it, dude. Don't think Freddie, don't think nothing, just go for that. But otherwise, the rest of the stuff I've done for Patriarchs in Black has been original. If you want me to speak about that, I can.
Yes, please do, because I'm a big fan of their work. I have to say that the Frontier song, that to me is amazing.
Yeah, well, in that tune, it was so, I didn't know it at all. I didn't know it from a hole on the floor. I didn't know it. And I listened to it over and over again, which is what I do. I'll steep myself in the song and I'll let it sit and marinate in my head for a while. And then if you listen to the original Dragon Attack, it's very sparse. It's got this kind of strange swagger to it that's just alternative. First of all, within the Queen wheelhouse, it's perfect. It's their amalgam of what they are, which is what Queen always did. And every time I think about stuff like that, I think, wow, Brian May, God, what an egalitarian dude. He's like, okay, want to do this? I'll do it. As long as it's got his guitar sound in there, that's his part. And so, but when I heard that tune, I was like, boy, oh boy, what are you going to channel for this one? So what I did was I sang it and I got a good take out of it. And I was like, oh, wow. Then becomes the delicate part of what vocal accents could you include? And it's usually with me with these things, it's best by putting in some kind of extra layer that you can make, very subtle in the mix. You can lower it, but as long as it gives something, so you've already got the true essence of the tune down. They've given you the music. You've overlaid a competent interpretation of the vocal as it has stood. And then on top of that is where you put the dressing. So on that tune, he leaves a lot of vocal room, and between the chords and don't take no prisoners. And then I have a little bit, let's do it in a drone, more of a texture. And that's what made it for me. I was like, oh, that puts my stamp on it. That's how I try to do any covers and stuff like that. Unless, of course, like, all right, you could do two methods of covers. If you're recording it, you lend your other stamp to it. But if you're only doing it live, you have to make it the best, most true, most absolute tour de force that you can. I mean, like, for example, one time I was with Riotgod. Sorry if I'm tangential. But one time I was with Riotgod, and we had to play the Surf Club, which I don't think is there anymore. We played with a Sebastian Bach-less Skid Row. It was the other guy. And I think after Sebastian, they've all been the other guy. But so we played with other guy, different guy. I think he's now dead guy. And the funny thing is, speaking of dead guy, this was during the period where Jim Baglino, who was also in Monster Magnet at one point, someone suggested, I think it was Jim, let's do a cover. Not everyone piped up what they wanted to do. And we didn't have, I think back then, more than a standard set, just because we hadn't written that many songs. They weren't there. So we already did a cover of, we were doing a cover of Speed King by Deep Purple, which we killed it. That was awesome. So they asked me, and I was like, well, why don't we do Long Live Rock and Roll? And then I heard like that big groan collectively. And I was like, listen, man, that's a kick-ass song. And we could easily pull it off. And I could sing Dio like nobody's business. It doesn't matter. And I then, I thought, oh man, maybe Mark, you spoke too soon. So I went and watched on YouTube nearly every singer who did his part. So I looked up Joe Lynn Turner, everyone who sang Long Live Rock and Roll. Because there's the hardest part in that tune is when he's like, live, that whole big deal. It's also a word because it's very loud. Anyway, but that live, and you're singing it full bore. You're not singing it like in this throat voice. So we did it. We worked on the cover. We put it together. It was part of the set. So it comes night, the time where we're going to sing the tune, and that starts out with that. Rock and roll. The whole craziness. And then we start that tune on the snare. And this guy just drunk guy come barreling from the back. He's like, oh. At the end of the song, I was like, this tune was for that dude. And I said, you see? I said to them, you see? I knew somebody would be here to appreciate it. But in that instance, my point was that there's no room in the live environment for such decoration of a song. So you have to just perform it in regard to all things under the subject of cover song. You just have to nail it, be cool and nail it. And if you're lucky, you will. But that's
a great story.
It's the most covers I've ever done with any band has been with Patriarchs. I mean, as far as in a short amount of time, there's been other instances of throughout different bands where you did a cover or so, but I never recorded them.
Well, let me tell you, I think that's a great story. It also has a lot of teaching component into it, because I think locally, if you go out to see bands and you're like, oh, it's a cover band, or there's so many tribute bands that are popping up. I was recently in Peekskill, and everyone online was talking about more people are coming out now for the tribute bands than for the actual bands. And there's like a big rage on them now that people are all kind of crawling out to see these tribute bands. And I think for a performer sense, there's a lot of pressure on them, because people are expecting to hear the songs a certain way, or at least recognize them. So that's why I think a lot of them are getting big venues, because they really do sound very, it's replicative of the actual song. So I think that's kind of interesting. People maybe can't afford to go to the shows, or they can't travel to go to the shows. So if something rolls into their local town, they're going to jump up and see the Bon Jovis or the Foreigners or whatever else is going out there.
Yeah, it sounds like one is so elitist, but I've never gravitated toward that. First of all, I think it comes generally from the fact that I'm not that devoted toward one particular band. But some people I'm not one of them. But some people, they just can't get enough of their favorite band. So if they're a big AC/DC fan and some sort of interestingly titled play upon one AC/DC song as the band's name comes through to their town in Wheeling, West Virginia, they're going to dig the heck out of it. That's just the way it goes. Personally, I know many musicians who have put their daughters through college on singing the covers every week at the Jersey Shore.
During the week, I was thinking of things I wanted to discuss with you.
Yes.
And I had like a vision in my head. And I was like, I have to ask him what he thinks of this. I'm not an expert on singers. I happen to be a huge fan of the way you sing. I think every singer has a different tone to their voice, but also an expression that you make the lyrics come alive for me personally, which I think is one of the best compliments you can give a singer. But I also had this vision of you. I don't know if you ever thought of hearing Godspell in your head, but I grew up with that play, Godspell, and the music of Godspell. And I was like, oh my God, if they did this live, I would pick Mark Sunshine for Godspell, because that to me would be perfect. And I know it's not like typical rock and roll, but to me, your
fan.
voice is just
I'm a
like,
big fan of,
oh, cool.
I'm a big fan.
Very cool.
I'm a huge fan. Like, in fact, on my YouTube, I'll send you the link. I did a Godspell mashup.
Really? Oh my God.
Yes, because you know why? I'll tell you why. I happened to field a call, and it was a telemarketer. And it was this Indian dude, and he was, obviously, he's not going to say his name is Sanjoy Mukherjee. His name is Charles or whatever. So he gets on the phone, hello, Mr. Sunshine, how are you? And I'm not making fun of that. It's just that the very Indian thing from a call center, you hear him all in the background, and he's just doing his job. But he's trying to sell me auto insurance or something. But part of his spiel, his pitch, he kept saying, and it must have been in the text, he's like, do you understand that day by day, the auto rates and this, day by day. And then I said, what, like, day by day, oh, dear Lord, three things you pray. And he was like, no, not that kind of day by day.
That is awesome. Oh my God.
I have it on my YouTube. I'll send you the link. And then I popped up like an image of the cast from the classic movie, But I would love that movie. That prepare that da. Oh yeah, absolutely, all of it. Like
all of it is right, because just the play, the pretense of the play, the storytelling, and then them weaving in the music, which is a little rock, but it's also got the hippie vibe of the times. That was early 70s. And I'm like, this is Mark. I'm like, this is so great. I can't believe you did that. Now I can't wait to hear it.
Oh, it's so... And the funny thing is, I reworked the arrangement. I just did it in my own little flavor. So you'll hear that. But I forget what I did. I can't remember if it was just purely vocally or if I put together some percussive elements. But and then I overlaid that in there. So, but on the phone conversation, I actually sang it to him. So I knew I would elicit his response that I could edit in later. And I have like a background on the video of just a call center. And, it was just a moment of hilarity because he was very accommodating toward my shenanigan.
Wow, that's awesome.
I love that whole period. Like, by the way, that whole time period where Jesus Christ Superstars at the same time, almost. So my old gal, God bless her, she challenged me to sing Gethsemane or Gethsemane. That there's that high note in there, that super duper Gillan high note. So she wanted me. I did that for her.
Wow.
That spirit that was going on then, even in Hair, this energy that came out of Broadway or off Broadway, the vocals, the spirit of it. I was as a kid, I was infused with that. I didn't even know it, but my parents had the Hair cassette. It's not like they were hippies. It's just that my dad worked in the audio video business and he brought it home because he got it for free. So I found all these things. That was a big part of my ingredient list as what you might be exposed to. And my dad didn't even know that he was giving me all these little lessons by bringing home different albums.
That's
Give me a
amazing. Who did he work for? What was his background?
It
Was
was
he?
just these. In fact, I'm detailing this in my. I have these concepts for my YouTube where I basically describe. I mean, I haven't posted it yet, but where I basically describe. I forget. I'm old. I'm old now. I'm not. I am. I have memories in me that people would not know about. And so what I try to describe in the video is that today, if you want to go get some sort of audio or a video equipment, you could go to Best Buy or you could go to Walmart. But in the 70s, you had to go to a specialty shop, an audio video store and it was a very different experience. I remember my dad worked at a place on West 41st Street. It was like 40. It was right next to a bar called Giggles. It was on 41st Street, and I the smell of the tubes and the plastic and the cardboard and the wires, and it was a very unique. It's burned in my mind, and I would go there as a kid because he got out of that field of endeavor in the 80s. But for the 70s, he would bring home demonstration albums, and that was it. Like, so you not only did you had your records that people that would come through there. It was a very interesting amalgam that today oh my God, like today it's so different. Like you're not going to go into a place where you see wall-to-wall receivers and different varieties of stereo equipment, amplifiers, this, that, very specific. Almost akin, almost like the same. Like when you go back in the 70s and you look at computer stuff, it was mainly hobbyists. They were assembling their own stuff, like erector sets. They'd put together their computers. They would do this stuff, and it was very, very niche. And then, but almost the same with audiophiles. You had, I mean, some people might go to the store to get a regular stereo because that's what you did. But mainly you had like a lot of audiophile people like who really, really love stereos and equipment, and that's what the culture was. But anyway, yeah. But he would bring home these albums, and they were some of them were complete awful. Like, how many people remember spinning the record of Glenn Close in her Broadway flop T-Rex? Nobody. But I listened to it because it was available. I mean, I found out about such people that I wouldn't have any exposure to otherwise, like Bonnie Bramlett. No one would know about Bonnie Bramlett. And, it's an ordinary album, or Eric Clapton's country album, Peaches or whatever it was called. Like, I mean, or Manu Dibango, like African soul. It was, this crazy stuff. And I had all this stuff because my dad would bring these things home. And I can't think for the life of me, because if you knew my dad, you wouldn't try to think now. I never really asked him back when he was alive. I was like, why did you even bother bringing home these things? Because they wouldn't listen to them. It was like it was a mission for me. It was a mission, and it created so many moments, and it wouldn't have been possible if he didn't bring home these, what they used to call demonstration albums, not for resale. So you'd be able to listen to the record maybe in the store. I'm not even sure what they did with it, but it said DJ copy only, and it would be on the vinyl sleeve. And I had, for the longest time, I had a host of those records, and I would listen to them, and I have little treasured stories where back in the day, I had moved out from Brooklyn. We lived in Brooklyn a while. And then in 1975, I moved out to New Jersey with the family. And I was beginning, at times, playing records on my sisters, Donnie and Marie, little, like, mainly meant for 45s. But it was, their merch. Donnie and Marie show. They had a show, a variety show on Channel 7, I believe. So I would listen, however, my mother had a RCA Victrola. I could play records on 78. It was so strange with tubes. It was very, very, they just picked up everything that they had from Brooklyn. It all fell like in a heap in Jersey. And I, as a young man, as a little boy, I would just discover these things. I would be like, oh, what's going on? That era of time for me was very magical because a lot of discovery was going on. Like in 75, 76, America was in the middle of Kiss fever. And all my young friends were like, oh man, Peter Criss is the best drummer in the world. And I'm like, see, back then, classic rock radio is not the anemic, ad-laden, constricted, whatever it is now. Like with basically all you're going to hear is Billy Joel and Elton John and Tom Petty, and that's about it. You're not going to ever hear anything else. You won't hear Jimi Hendrix on a good day, nothing. But back in the day, it was still pretty much a viable situation. Yet, 76, Rush really hadn't conquered the American market like they would in the 80s. So, but my dad brought home this album, All the World's a Stage, and there was no radio exposure for me about that. I just picked it up, and it was a purple album, and it was a double album, and I was like, wow. And I listened to, I guess, what was a precursor to YYZ, the famous tour de force of Neil Peart. And so when these kids were saying to me, Peter Criss, the best drummer, I'm like, no. Have you heard this dude? I was like, this guy is incredible. And but I wouldn't have even known that. To complement what I was saying, my dad brought home, like when he brought home these albums for me, that was a mere transportation. Like, so he brought it home and set it down. But sometimes, back then, cassette culture was still active. And so, and by the way, I had more than my share of cool JVC boomboxes that came home. But these guys would make cassettes for me. So what was a person my age listening to Warm Leatherette? Or listening to these crazy stuff, because his workers in the back room would make these cassettes. So on one side would be like John Coltrane, Blue Train, and on the other side would be something entirely different. So they gave me this other kind of thing, like where, I heard the Waitresses, and, so that was the mid-70s kind of, that's where the Talking Heads came out of, that whole situation. And so I was getting little feelers about that, which was pretty amazing. And then I remember, because of such stuff, for example, in 82, when everyone was all enthralled by Africa Bambaataa, I said, no, that's Kraftwerk. And they're like, who? I'm like, that's Kraftwerk. They took that, and I know the sampling was not a name back then, but they borrowed that. I said, that's from this band Kraftwerk, and because I had it on a little cassette, Trans-Europe Express, and that blew my mind. That was my first exposure to that kind of cross-pollination,
That's amazing, especially being that young and being able to recognize sound. When do you remember realizing that you could really sing? Was that like in a school choir, or is that more listening to these albums?
I never had a recognition of that. There's a very definitive marking point where, in a nutshell, if I could do it, when I grew up in a pretty crazy household. It was not one that was conducive toward my intrinsic creative energy. I was adopted, and my folks, their essence was very, very different than my very hyper creative. It's almost like a family of chickens got a falcon egg, and they had to figure it out. Very dangerous, very, very different, very, at times, upsetting for them. My dad was always easygoing, but my mother, she had a real struggle on her hands with me. But because of the nature, this stressful environment as it involved me, the first part of my life was me endeavoring to do things I could do quietly. So there was and my parents had a very Benjamin Spock way of going about things. I would do boy things, and my sister would do girl things. Within the list of girl things, she got piano lessons. I did not. They sent me off to like stupid stuff I could care less about, like Cub Scouts. That was a super fail. I just couldn't, it wasn't suitable to my very hungry mind for like creative stuff that I didn't even know about. So they were ill prepared to deal with what intrinsic talents I had, and I was at a loss to figure out what to do with them as parents because they were so plainly different than me. So why I say that is because eventually, because of all the things I would do quietly, it established in my parents' mind that I was going to be a visual artist. And yet they really didn't know that was just the thing that I would do, because there was rarely any other things I could do that wouldn't be chastised for either their noise making or whatever. My mother was very touchy, you know. I mean, I would constantly be drumming on my like or fidgeting with my hands, and that led to my the first musical instrument I endeavored to rebelliously try. Like I was in art school. I was at the School of Visual Arts, but I guess you could say, for the lack of a better word, I had a fracture. I had an existential fracture where a deep part of my soul forced the issue and said, dude, this is fun. It certainly is fun, but it ain't you. It's not you. And I didn't even know what me was. But one, as I tell in my this account that'll be on my YouTube, hopefully sooner than later, a guy at SVA saw me drumming or doing finger patterns on a chair, and he was like, his name was Andy. I think he was from Queens or Long Island. And he said, you should get a drum set, dude. And that was all it took. I immediately went home, and I worked out the method by which I would get it. I went up to Manny's on 48th Street. I got myself a pearl drum set with the piece de resistance was the Zildjian Platinum China. I loved the way it sounded. And I didn't even know how to set up the kit. My parents were absolutely floored that this was what I was going to endeavor to do. And my grandparents were, Mark, what are you doing down there? They were I grew up in a Jewish family. So I was like, you're killing me. And so I realized, and this is why it's almost so alien to me right now. It was very much, I'm sure that as a caterpillar is molding its cocoon, if you were to stop him for a moment and say, hey, what are you doing? I don't think he would know anything about the butterfly that was coming. He was like, this is just something I have to do, and I'm doing it. And that is how I equate the energy that guided me along, because I had no vocal training. I had nothing. It was like I took the literal hard road. I had to discover. I mean, I started out singing in a very low range because I didn't have any training. And it would take years to where I would naturally discover my higher range. And it would take all kinds of autodidactic practices, like stuff that's very unglamorous, like working on breath control. For example, if you're going to want to sing Joni Mitchell, didn't it feel good? Didn't it feel good? All that whole note, all the way. Didn't it feel long notes requiring a lot of breath, or like Lovely Day by Bill Withers, a lovely day. Keep going all the way. Do not stop. Do not run out of breath. And you got to learn how to control that. And I would sit there and just hold out notes just sit there holding out a note, trying to keep it as even as possible. These were little games that I would play. And the first music I was actually attracted to, which is funny because eventually I found out where I always knew that I was Irish, but I eventually got 23andMe kind of thing hooked up, and I did find out that I'm 98% Scotch-Irish. But the funny thing is that the music that I was attracted to initially was Irish music because of the way that the voice would be moved. Like the way that it was in the month of January, a pretty young girl with a saltier in her eye, like that wavering. I was like immediately attracted to that, where, so I found out that was a way you could move your voice, and then that led to, things that I guess other people learn in a structured environment, but how to discover your vibrato, and then how to discover your color, and ways that stylistically now determine what you do, and a lot of color, and that's what differentiates your voice from someone else. But that was it. Like, but to the point, I didn't have any. I marvel at it myself, because I was like, I don't remember when the switch went on. But what I would do was, apparently one day I said, I wanted to grow my hair long. And I figured that in order to grow your hair long, you had to have a reason. So I was like, well, I'll be a singer. And I was living at my folks' house. I was 19, and at night, I would take out my father's car out of the garage, just take it outside the garage, and I would sing in the car and rehearse in the car. And during the day, when my parents were away at work, and my grandparents were nigh deaf, so it didn't really matter. And I wasn't recording anything, certainly not. I would go into my sister's room and rehearse songs. And that's where I rehearsed my first songs that I ever had to sing, which was Am I Evil? I tried out for a band called Chalice, and that's notable because the current member of Monster Magnet on drums, Bob Pantella, that would begin my association with him, my familiarity with him. Like, I didn't make that band, but that's what started everything, I had to sing Green Hell and Am I Evil? And I had never sung before in my life until I went into that rehearsal space and just went for it. And that was about it.
You really have a fascinating story, Mark. I mean, this is really incredible. I think you need to not just document this on YouTube, but you might need a book too.
Oh my! The thing is, though, it's so filled with. It's funny. You never know. When I did my first tour with Unida, we played a gig at a festival called Tabernas, which is put together, and it's staged in Spain, in the Andalusian area, where it's, I think, the legitimate only place that can geologically qualify as a desert in Europe. And it's in the south of Spain, not too far from Africa, so it's understandable. But they've got a little western town there where they've filmed stuff, like for Sergio Aragonis, or no, that's a cartoonist, Sergio Leone, or whoever, one Sergio somewhere. They do westerns there, and it's a whole western town, propped up. So it was my first gig with them. I was nervous, because I took a lot of flack because I was filling in or taking the place of John Garcia, who is their absolutely without a question iconic stoner rock singer coming out of Caius, and then lending his talents to Unida, Hermano, and Vistacino and other bands, and his own solo stuff. But so I was taking a lot of crap, just even having the stones to go and try and do this. So I was a little nervous, but I got through it, and that was our first. I believe that was our second show. And at the end of the show, this German guy comes up to me, and he gives me a Unida CD to sign. I said, buddy, I'm not on this. And he goes, oh, it's okay. And then he gave me a Riotgod CD, and I was like, oh, well, I'm on this one. I know that. But then, remember that band I told you about with Ed Furman? We had one CD, and it was called Sickness and Wealth, and it was from 1993. It was the only CD that we did. It was independently released. It was never pushed by a label or acquired by a label. And where else would you get it? Maybe eBay. So this guy comes up and he gives me one of those to sign, and I was like, holy smokes, you incredible researcher. I was like, well, if now's the time to get me to sign this, I must admit, good on you. I was like, okay, here you go. I was like, oh my God, holy cow. Because that was a very, very different time. I was influenced by a whole bunch of different stuff. And I embrace it for the fact that I did it at all. But the character that I was then along my journey of vocalizing, I was very much still in my curing phase. Like, I'm figuring out what I don't like. I was like at, say, 50% capacity as to what I am now. Because, like, it's like a video game. You haven't unlocked these other things yet. You haven't figured out certain things. Sometimes things come to you, like because of practice, and all of a sudden you have a new little skill. But back then, so anyway, but for, when, in my mind, when I hear those songs, I'm like, oh, well, there you go. It's just so different. And so when he had me sign it, I was like, wow. wow. I'm so strange. Like I'll make these things and then I'll have made them, and I don't know if it's alien or not, but there are very few things that I go back to, like with any kind of. Whereas, like the other day on Facebook, someone posted one of the very first bands I was in called Elysium. And there's been a few of them. It's a very popular name, apparently, because if you look at the Encyclopedia Metallum, they have to specify that, I'm the New Jersey Elysium from this time period, not the Florida Elysium from this time period. But someone posted that cassette, and like in the comments, people were like, yeah, I still listen to this. And I was like, really? Oh my God. Like, to me, that's like looking at clothes that you wore in 1982. I mean, and I'm not ashamed of it. I wouldn't, I don't know. I'm a weird guy. I would never even, I mean, every now and then I have them digitally. Someone remastered them and I have them in digital form, which I will be putting in my music retrospective. But I was kind of like honored and curious about how anyone would still want to listen to it. Because my voice is so deep in register, I listen to it and I'm like, it's like looking at an awkward grade school portrait. I'm like, oh,
Yeah, that I understand though, but I think it's part of Mark Sunshine history that is incredible that it's out there. Wow, you have so much. I will have to do a second interview with you because you are so fascinating to me. Oh my God, it's so great. Can you tell everyone what's going on with you now and how we can follow you on social media and all of that?
I've got my YouTube, at Mark Sunshine, but I also have a redirect that I use, daysofmylives.com. And that I'm working on it, and I'm trying to figure out exactly how I will make use of the modern YouTube as we know it. Because I've had the account forever, but I never looked at it as a means of expression. Also, I had musical things I was doing, so I wasn't able to sit there and devote my day in, day out to YouTube. But I'm starting to get more into it and getting content together that amply represents my nature as a visual artist and also as a performer. I'm working with 3 bands. I'm working with Unida. They have an EP in the works. There's nothing more I can say except for the fact that I've recorded vocals, and that is in process. I'll be appearing with them at Ripplefest this year, which is a festival down in Texas. This will be the second time we've played that affair. And then we'll be at Tabernas again in Spain. Only 2 gigs this year with Unida. Patriarchs in Black has an album coming out in the summer. And for this one, I contributed, I think, 4 songs. And it's pretty cool because one of the songs is a continuation. No one would really know. But like, I do that sometimes. I will bridge, like, there was one tune on one of the Patriarchs albums called Show Them Your Power, which is about my old girl who passed away from cancer. And I made a song up about that. And then some stuff happened relating to that area of my life. And I wrote like a continuation song, which you wouldn't even know if I didn't tell anyone. But that one is featured on this upcoming album of theirs for Patriarchs. And then lastly, which I've been working on today, I'll be working on it. I'm involved with a band called The Lost Beacon that features Trevor Ports on guitar. He's in other bands called Abhoria. And what's the other one? Oh God, it escapes me. But he's got 2 other bands, but they're very, very different. Those are, oh my God, they're, I don't know what to call it, but it's like, searching lamely I am for like a genre defier, whatever, like a descriptor. I won't want to say extreme, but like it's definitely hardcore kind of, I don't know, black metal, some sort of something. I sound so ill-equipped to even say, but it's music that he does. But it's very different than this because the Lost Beacon is, it's weird. My bass player for Unida, we were talking, and he's like, in so much as the style of vocals that I most often perform, I guess it's because of my demographic, my age, what I grew up with, what I've absorbed along the way. But I am very comfortable singing like that kind of rock, but doing it in a way that doesn't seem like it's campy, or I want to have the vitality of that. There is a vitality to that, and it's a shame that most often it seems that the United States is doomed to come up with or to contribute to genres and styles, either coming up with them whole cloth, such as blues and R&B, but even what they've offered to metal, or like through the in certain ways, certain proto bands like MC5 and Free, or like Blue Cheer, and it got overlooked, like, this rock style. Except you can still go to Europe and people will appreciate it. They will appreciate it just like they always have for like blues or whatever. Like Jimi Hendrix had to go to England to make it happen. And in this day and age, there's not a lot of. So Colin was like, your style of vocalist, either all the guys are dead, or there's no one that really does it in a certain way. I don't ever try to do that. I know what I like. And so anyway, but the Lost Beacon, I'm working on that now, and it's a great amalgam. Like, for example, I do two covers with them. I'm doing Eye in the Sky by Alan Parsons, and I'm doing Synchronicity by the Police. And I was like, wow. And so there's a really unique situation because there's metal involved there, but some people have said it sounds theatrical, which I'm not adverse to. As long as I'm singing, I'm content, But otherwise, I'm doing. If not the vocal thing, I'm just doing my artwork.
Wow. Well, it has been a pleasure to have you on, Mark. We'll follow your Instagram, Mark Sunshine.
Mark_sun_shine. That's the Instagram.
Very good. Well, thank you again, Mark.
Thank you. I'm very, very appreciative of even being considered.
Thank you.
Night, it would envelop me. Delusions wrapping dreams like a coil.
You have been listening to Bringing the Darkness to the Light with Catherine Nadal, professional psychic medium, Dream Central Station, LLC. My audio editor is Al Hemberger at the Loft Recording Studios in Bronxville, New York. This is WNEW 102.7 FM radio.